Premium gas does almost nothing for most of the vehicles it gets poured into, and in the next half hour you're going to learn exactly which side of that line your own vehicle sits on, what the habit is really costing you every year, and where the extra money at the pump actually ends up. Because it does not end up where you think it does. As of the middle of this month, the national average for a gallon of regular is sitting right around $4.06. And premium is running somewhere between 85 cents and $1 above it depending on where you live. Punch that button twice a week for a year and you have quietly handed over the price of a decent set of tires. I've had enough cylinder heads off over the years to know what real detonation damage looks like. The piston crown comes out looking like somebody went at it with a sandblaster, tiny pits chewed into the aluminium where the shockwaves hammered it. That is what Octane exists to prevent. That and nothing else. Octane is not cleanliness, it is not energy, it is not quality, and the fact that the industry chose the word premium for it is the single most profitable piece of vocabulary in American retail. 3 things I want you to hang on to while we work through this. First, there is a specific grade sitting on that pump right now that mostly isn't a real product at all. It gets mixed inside the hose while you stand there, and I'll show you the arithmetic that proves you're being charged more for it than the ingredients cost. Second, in one large controlled study, a single vehicle really did pick up about 7% better fuel economy on premium, and I'll tell you which one it was and why that number still doesn't rescue the argument. And third, the gap between regular and premium has roughly quadrupled since 2010, but the gap at the wholesale rack barely moved. Somebody is pocketing that difference. The government's own commissioned study went looking for who, and I'll hand you the answer near the end. Let's start with the part almost nobody has straight. Octane is a measure of how hard a fuel resists exploding on its own. That's it. It is a resistance rating, not a strength rating. And here's the bit that trips up sensible people. A gallon of 93 does not contain more energy than a gallon of 87. Roughly speaking, they carry the same heat value. You are not buying more fuel in the gallon. You are buying a gallon that is harder to set off by accident. Think about how a fire gets lit in a cylinder. The piston comes up, squeezing air and fuel into a space a fraction of its original size. Squeezing anything makes it hot. You know this if you've ever pumped up a bike tire and felt the pump body warm in your hand. At the right instant, the plug fires and a flame front sets off across the chamber, smooth and controlled, pushing the piston down. That's the whole job. Now the trouble. The gas out ahead of that flame front, the technicians call it the end gas, is getting squeezed harder and hotter by the advancing burn. If it gets hot enough, it lights itself. No spark needed. You now have 2 fires in one chamber slamming into each other, and the collision produces a pressure spike several times higher than normal combustion, moving faster than sound. That's knock. That's the metallic rattle like loose marbles in a coffee can when you lean on the throttle going up a grade. High-octane fuel simply holds out longer before it does that. Forget the term for a second and picture 2 piles of kindling. One's bone dry, one's damp, same amount of wood, same amount of heat in it when it burns. But you can hold a match near the damp one a lot longer before it goes up on you. Premium is the damp kindling. If your engine was never going to light it early anyway, the dampness buys you exactly nothing. The number on the yellow sticker is an average of 2 laboratory tests, one gentle, one brutal. And that averaged figure is what the pump is legally allowed to advertise. Europeans post the gentler number, which is why a European car's manual talks about 95 and 98 octane, and yours talks about 87 and 91. Same fuel, different yardstick. Anybody telling you European gas is dramatically better because the number is bigger is reading a thermometer in the wrong scale. The men who worked all this out in the 1920s weren't guessing either. Knock was the single biggest barrier to making engines more efficient. You couldn't raise compression without the engine trying to destroy itself. And the reference scale that came out of that work in the late 20s is still the one we use. 2 pure chemicals, one that knocks readily and one that resists like mad, blended until the mix behaves the same as the fuel you're testing. 93 octane means it behaves like a blend that's 93% of the good stuff. Nearly a century later, and nobody's improved on it. So the whole question reduces to one thing. Does your engine actually ask for that resistance? And for the overwhelming majority of what's out on the road, the answer is a flat no. Here's how the manufacturer tells you, and this is the most important 90 seconds of this whole video. There are 3 categories, and the wording matters enormously. Regular recommended, about 7 out of 10 drivers own one of these. Your engine's compression and boost were designed around 87 from the drawing board. Nothing in the fuel system, the tune, or the hardware can convert extra octane into anything you'd notice. Premium required, roughly 1 in 6. High compression, hard boost, tight tuning. The manual will use the word required, and it will usually be repeated inside the fuel door. Give this engine a steady diet of regular and it will protect itself, but it will do it by giving you less. And then the slippery middle, premium recommended, not required, recommended. This is where the money leaks out, because that word has been carefully chosen to make you feel like a cheapskate for ignoring it. Now for the testing, because this is where opinion stops and instruments start. By the way, if you drive an SUV and want to keep it reliable for hundreds of thousands of miles without wasting money at the repair shop, I put together a guide called the 500K Mile Car Care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your SUV last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot mechanic upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera or grab it from the first pinned comment below. Back in 2016, the American Automobile Association ran the definitive version of this experiment at a research center in Los Angeles. Chassis dynamometer, emissions equipment, EPA driving cycles. They ran a V8 pickup, a V6 sedan, and a 4-cylinder compact, all vehicles designed for regular, on certified 87 and certified 93, with everything else held identical. Certified test fuel, so no variation in additives or quality could sneak in and muddy the result. No significant improvement in horsepower. No significant improvement in fuel economy. No significant improvement in emissions. Nothing. There's one detail in that work that I find genuinely fascinating and that nobody has ever explained to my satisfaction. The engineers measured ignition timing on both fuels, and the cars did notice the difference. The timing shifted when premium went in. The computers knew. They just didn't do anything useful with the knowledge. They saw the better fuel, adjusted, and delivered the same power and the same mileage anyway. I have my suspicions about why. My read is that these tunes are optimized around a target the engineers had already reached on 87, so extra headroom simply goes unspent. But that's me reasoning from how calibration works, not something anybody published. Take it as a suspicion, not a fact. That same organization put a number on the national scale of the habit, about 16.5 million American drivers filling up with premium in cars that don't ask for it, and roughly $2.1 billion a year spent for nothing. $2 billion. On a word. Now here's where I have to be fair, because the story got more interesting 3 years later. They went back and tested the awkward middle category, the premium recommended vehicles, and this time they leaned on them. Not gentle city cycles. Towing. Loaded up with cargo. Hard acceleration. Real work. The kind that pushes an engine into the corner of the map where Octane actually earns its keep. 6 vehicles. A full-size pickup, a large luxury SUV, a small roadster, a compact hatch, a muscle car, and a small crossover. Averaged across all 6, premium bought 2.7% better fuel economy and 1.4% more horsepower. And here's the loop I promised you. The luxury SUV was the standout at about 7% better economy, with the pickup close behind around 5. But look at the other end of the same table. One of the small European cars actually came out slightly worse on premium, a 1% loss. So the honest summary is not, premium helps a little. It's under heavy load. In an engine tuned for it, premium sometimes helps a little, sometimes not at all, and occasionally goes the wrong way. 2 other independent tests are worth putting beside that, and they disagree with each other, which is exactly why I'm telling you about both. A consumer testing organization ran 2 premium recommended sedans through instrumented fuel economy and acceleration work on both grades, and found the results identical. Same mileage, same 0 to 60, no pinging, no difference in how the cars felt or sounded. A car magazine strapped a twin-turbo V6 pickup to a chassis dyno and measured a drop from about 380 horsepower at the wheels on 93 down to about 360 on 87. 20 horsepower is not nothing. Both of those are real. They don't contradict each other as much as they look like they do. The turbocharged truck is precisely the case where boost and cylinder pressure make octane matter, and the naturally aspirated sedans are precisely the case where it doesn't. When I have to pick a working assumption for someone who can't test their own vehicle, I take the conservative one. Assume the benefit is small unless you're boosted and working hard, and make the fuel prove otherwise on your own mileage log. Which brings us to arithmetic, and this is the part I'd write on the back of your hand. Premium currently costs somewhere around 20 to 22% more per gallon than regular at the national average. So for the upgrade to break even, not to be a good deal, just to break even, your fuel economy has to improve by that same percentage. 20%. The best single result in a controlled towing and hauling test was 7. The average was under 3. It isn't close. It has never been close. You would need premium to deliver something like triple the best result anybody has ever measured before the money even balances out. And the performance side works the same way. If you paid 20% more per gallon and got 1.4% more horsepower, you bought power at roughly 14 times the going rate. If that's a conscious choice for a weekend car you love, fine, it's your money and I'm not the fun police. But it should be a choice you made, not a habit you drifted into. So where does the $1,500 a year in the title come from? Let's be honest about it rather than waving a scary number around. 15,000 miles at 22 miles per gallon is about 680 gallons. At an 86-cent spread, that's roughly $590 a year for one car. Put a truck in the driveway instead, 18,000 miles at 15 miles per gallon, and you're at 1,200 gallons and better than $1,000. 2 vehicles in a household or one work truck that never stops moving, and $1,500 is not a headline, it's a Tuesday. A household spending $1,500 a year on octane it can't use is completely ordinary. If you're still with me, we're through the hardest part and the rest is genuinely useful. Do me one favor before we carry on. If this has been worth your time, subscribe, because this is the kind of thing that never gets explained properly by anyone with a financial interest in the answer. Right, because there's a much better place to spend that same money and almost nobody knows it exists. Here it is. Fuel grade and fuel quality are 2 entirely separate things, and you've been shopping for the wrong one. Since the mid-1990s, the Environmental Protection Agency has required every gallon of gasoline sold in this country to contain a minimum level of detergent additive. The industry calls it the lowest additive concentration, which tells you everything about how ambitious it is. It's a floor, not a target. And within a few years, the automakers were finding that the floor wasn't holding up their end. Engines were coming back with deposits on the intake valves and injectors that the legal minimum simply wasn't preventing. So in 2004, a group of manufacturers, the big domestic names alongside the Japanese and German ones, wrote their own standard and called it top tier. To license the brand, a fuel retailer has to put an approved additive package in every grade at every station under that brand, typically at 2 to 3 times the federal minimum, verified by independent laboratory engine tests, and they're forbidden from using certain metallic octane boosters that wreck emissions equipment. Around 80-odd retail brands carry it now. The deposit numbers are not subtle. Testing has repeatedly shown top-tier fuel producing something in the region of 19 times fewer engine deposits than fuel meeting only the legal minimum. 19 times. Deposits are the things that genuinely cost you. They mess up injector spray patterns, restrict airflow, quietly eat a few % of your mileage, and eventually cost you a shop visit. And the whole point, the bit that should make you sit up, you can buy top-tier regular. 87 octane, full detergent package, cheapest button on the pump. It is entirely possible to buy premium grade fuel from a station that meets no standard beyond the legal floor, and to buy the cheapest grade at a top-tier station and get dramatically better protection. Grade is what the engine needs. Quality is what the engine deserves. Only one of them is on the big illuminated sign out by the road. One honest caveat, because I'm not going to oversell this either. If you drive a modern, direct injected engine, and most turbocharged engines built in the last decade are, the fuel never touches the back of the intake valves. It's sprayed straight into the cylinder at enormous pressure. So the detergents, however good, physically cannot wash a surface they never reach, which is why those engines are prone to carbon buildup on the valve backs regardless of what you feed them. Good fuel still keeps your injectors and combustion chambers clean, and that's worth having. It is not a cure for a problem that lives upstream of where the fuel goes. Now that grade in the middle, midgrade. 89 octane sitting there looking like a sensible compromise, taking about 5% of all gasoline sales in the country. At a great many stations, midgrade is not a product, it's an event that happens in the hose. There are 2 gasoline tanks under the forecourt, regular and premium, and when you press the middle button, the dispenser blends the 2 on the way out to make 89. Not every station does this. Some genuinely stock 3 tanks, and you can sometimes tell by whether the pump has one hose for all 3 grades or separate nozzles. But blending at the dispenser is common enough that you should assume it until you know otherwise, which means the arithmetic is checkable. If midgrade is 2 parts regular to 1 part premium, its honest cost is 1/3 of the spread above regular. Say regular's $4 and premium's $4.86. That blend costs the station about 29 cents over regular. Look at what they're charging you for the middle button. At a lot of stations it's 40 or 50. You are being charged a mixing fee for a mix performed by a solenoid valve using 2 liquids already sitting in the ground beneath your feet. And here's the kicker. If you actually needed 89 in a hurry, you could buy half a tank of regular and half a tank of premium and let them blend in your own tank and come out ahead of the middle button. I'm not suggesting you make a hobby of it. I'm pointing out that a product you can replicate yourself in your own tank for less probably shouldn't carry a premium. If you live out west, there's a wrinkle worth knowing. In Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and parts of Montana and Idaho, the cheapest grade at the pump is 85 octane, not 87. That's a legacy of altitude. Thin air means less oxygen in the cylinder, which means lower effective compression, which means less octane needed. It made perfect sense in the era of carburetors. It makes considerably less sense now. The reduction in octane requirement with elevation turned out to be far smaller for modern engines than for the old ones the rule was written around, and the exception it doesn't cover at all is forced induction. A turbocharger compresses the thin air right back up to sea level density. It doesn't care what the barometer says. If you run a turbo at altitude, 85 is not your regular. Your regular is whatever number your manual prints, and out there that means paying mid-grade prices for ordinary fuel, which is a lousy deal but a lot cheaper than a set of pistons. The other button worth understanding is the yellow one marked 88 sold as unleaded 88, which is 15% ethanol rather than the usual 10. Ethanol is a genuinely high-octane substance, around 113 on its own, which is how a fuel with more ethanol in it ends up with a higher number and a lower price at the same time. It's approved for cars, trucks, and SUVs from model year 2001 onward. It usually runs cheaper than regular, and it will give you very slightly worse mileage because ethanol carries less energy per gallon. And here's the safety note that actually matters because it's the one people get wrong in their own garage. It is not approved for motorcycles, boats, older vehicles, or any small engine. Your mower, your saw, your generator, your outboard. Those fuel systems use rubbers and plastics that alcohol attacks, and a cracked fuel line on a boat is not a maintenance issue, it's a fire. If you fill a red can at the pump, know which button you pushed. Before we get to who's making the money, one more thing, and this is for those of you who've stuck it out this far. You are trusting a number painted on a plastic panel. So who checks it? State weights and measures offices do, and the results are strange enough that I want to lay both out rather than pick the one that suits my argument. One state ran a 2-week unannounced sweep of 371 stations across every county, testing every grade with portable octane analyzers and sending anything questionable to a lab. 2 stations failed, 2 out of 371. That's a compliance rate you'd be proud of in any industry. Then there's an analysis of inspection data from a large city, published earlier this year, which found that nearly every station in the city had failed at least one inspection over 2 years, with failed octane samples the single most common violation by a distance. Over 1,000 pump shutdowns. Same country, same equipment, wildly different picture. I don't know how to reconcile those two, and I'm not going to pretend I do. It might be inspection frequency, it might be how a fail gets counted, it might genuinely be that dense urban markets with lots of independent stations behave differently. What I take from it is narrow and practical. Octane fraud is real, it happens, it's punished when it's caught. And the way you'd notice it is your engine pinging under load on fuel that shouldn't ping. If a specific station makes your engine rattle and others don't, that's not superstition. That's data. Right? Where's your money going? The gap between regular and premium held steady for the better part of 2 decades. Through the 90s and 2000s, adjusted for inflation, you were looking at roughly a quarter to a third of a dollar between the cheapest and dearest button. Then, around 2010, it started climbing. 50 cents by 2017, around 70 by 2020. Past 80 in 2022. Today, it's brushing $1 in a lot of markets. Now, the obvious explanation is that high-octane fuel got harder or costlier to make. Sulfur rules changed. Refineries had to adjust. That story's available and it sounds reasonable. The Energy Information Administration went and checked it. They commissioned an outside engineering firm to pull apart refinery operations and find out whether the cost of producing octane explained the widening gap. And the study found what it found: the difference in price between grades at the rack, the wholesale terminal where the tanker loads up, had not significantly changed since 2010. The refining side of the story doesn't hold. Over roughly 2 decades, the retail gap widened by about 70 cents, while the wholesale gap moved something like 20. So the extra 50 cents in that dollar isn't being earned in the refinery. It's being added between the terminal and the nozzle. It is a retail margin, and it is landing in the till at the station where you're standing. An oil market analyst asked about it recently didn't dress it up at all. His answer was simply that the service station is the one making the money. And now ask yourself why they can. Because premium demand is stubborn. Even as the gap widened, premium share of gasoline sales went up from around 9% a decade or so back to roughly 13%. When the price of something rises sharply and people buy more of it, that's not a market. That's a captive audience. Part of that is genuine. More new vehicles genuinely call for higher octane than used to. But part of it is the 16.5 million drivers a year buying it for a car that cannot use it. And those people are the most price-insensitive customers on the entire forecourt because they were never buying a specification in the first place. They were buying reassurance. That's what's being sold to you, and here's the precise shape of the deception. It is not that premium is a bad product, it's a perfectly good product that some engines genuinely require. The deception is the pricing of it against a cost that isn't there. You are being invited to believe that the extra 86 cents reflects something difficult and expensive that happened in a refinery. And the federal government's own commissioned analysis says it mostly didn't. You're paying a refinery-sized premium for a retail-sized cost, and the label on the button does the persuading so nobody has to say a word to you. Nobody's breaking a law. Nobody's conspiring. Someone in a pricing department worked out that the drivers who press that button don't check and priced accordingly. And every station within sight followed, because why wouldn't they? It's a decision made in an office, repeated across 100,000 forecourts, and it only works on a person who thinks premium is a description of the fuel rather than a description of the price. You know the sentence now. It won't work on you again. There's something bigger sitting underneath this, and it isn't about gasoline. The word premium is doing a job that a specification used to do. Somewhere along the way, we stopped buying things by what they are and started buying them by where they sit in a hierarchy. Good, better, best, standard, plus, ultimate. And the hierarchy is a marketing structure, not an engineering one. Your engine has never once read the sign. It has a compression ratio, a boost target, and a knock sensor, and it responds to a number, not to an adjective. The skill worth having here isn't automotive knowledge. It's the habit of asking what a word is standing in for. Premium stands in for octane. Octane stands in for knock resistance. Knock resistance is worth money to exactly the engines that need it and worth nothing to the ones that don't, and the entire gap between those two facts is where somebody's margin lives. That same move gets run on you at the paint counter, the tire shop, the appliance store, and the lumberyard every single week. You don't need to become an expert in all of it. You need one question, asked calmly at the moment of purchase. What is the physical difference, and does the thing I own actually use it? Most of the time there's a real answer and it's fine. Now and then there isn't one, and the silence tells you everything. So here's what to actually do. 5 steps, and you can start tonight. 1. Open the fuel door and read what's printed there, then check the manual. You're looking for one of 3 words: required, recommended, or nothing at all. Photograph it so you never have to wonder again. 2. If it says required, buy premium and stop thinking about it. That engine's compression and boost were designed around it, and while modern knock control will protect the hardware on regular, you'll be paying for that protection in power and mileage anyway. If it says nothing, buy regular. You have a settled, dyno-verified answer, and there is nothing further to discuss. 3. If it says recommended, run the numbers rather than the feelings. Divide the price gap by the price of regular. 86 cents on $4.06 is about 21%. That's your break-even. Premium has to improve your real-world mileage by 21% to pay for itself, and nothing in any controlled test has ever come within shouting distance of that. If you tow heavy, haul loaded, or work a turbo hard in summer heat, Premium may genuinely be buying you something under those specific conditions. Buy it for those trips and stop buying it for the commute. 4. Test it yourself properly because your vehicle is the only one that matters. Run the tank down low, fill with one grade, reset the trip computer, and drive your normal week. Do it twice on that grade, then 2 full tanks of the other, same roads, same right foot. Calculate by hand, gallons at the pump divided into miles on the trip meter, not whatever the dashboard claims. 4 tanks and about a month gets you an answer that no study can give you because no study drove your route. 5. Whatever grade you land on, buy it from a top-tier retailer. That's the upgrade that's actually worth paying for. It's available on the cheapest button and it costs you next to nothing. Do step 1 tonight. It takes 90 seconds with a flashlight, and by the weekend you'll know whether the last few years of pressing that button bought you anything at all. For most of you, the answer is going to sting a little. Then it's going to feel very good every single fill-up for the rest of the time you own the vehicle. Now, some of you are already typing, and I know roughly what it says. It says your truck absolutely runs better on Premium, you can feel it, it pulls harder, and it gets better mileage, and no lab in California is going to tell you otherwise. Good. Come and argue. But bring the numbers. Give me the vehicle, the engine, whether it's turbocharged, and your hand-calculated mileage on both grades over at least 2 tanks each. If you've got a boosted engine and real figures showing a genuine gain, I want to see it because that's precisely the case where the testing says you might be right and I'd rather learn something than win something. What I'll gently push back on is it feels smoother because a fresh tank of anything feels smoother. And if you've got the opposite story, the car that's done 200,000 miles on the cheap button and never rattled once, post that too. Those are worth more than any study. Subscribe if you'd like more of this sort of thing pulled apart. There's a thread here I deliberately left alone today. The reason more and more new vehicles arrive with Premium recommended on the fuel door has less to do with what you want from the engine and more to do with the fuel economy standards the manufacturer has to hit. Higher octane lets them run higher compression gets them numbers on a certificate, and the fuel bill for achieving it lands on you rather than on them. I've been chasing that one for a while and I'm not finished with it. Until then, read the fuel door, do the arithmetic, and quit paying refinery prices for a retail markup. Look after your engine, and it'll look after you.